Many people expect God to work in loud and dramatic ways. They look for instant miracles and clear signs. When life feels normal, they assume nothing spiritual is happening. This mindset causes them to overlook quiet movements. God often works in subtle ways that require attention. Daily routines can hide divine activity. People rush through their days without reflection. They focus on problems, not patterns. When blessings come slowly, they feel unnoticed. God's work often unfolds in ordinary moments. Another reason people miss God's work is distraction. Constant noise fills the mind. Social pressure, fear, and stress block spiritual awareness. When the heart is crowded, clarity fades. God speaks softly, not through chaos. Recognizing God's presence requires stillness. Awareness grows when expectations change. Faith sharpens when patience increases. When people slow down, they begin to notice guidance. God has been working all along. God does not always announce his actions. Many expect sudden breakthroughs. Instead, God often uses small shifts. These quiet changes lead to lasting transformation. A changed mindset is one of God's quiet moves. Peace replaces fear without explanation. Strength appears during weakness. These moments feel internal, not dramatic, yet they shape the future deeply. God also moves through daily protection. Missed accidents, delayed plans, unseen dangers avoided. These silent interventions go unnoticed until reflection reveals their purpose. Quiet movements build strong faith. They teach trust instead of excitement. Over time, people realize God's presence was constant. Loud miracles impress, but quiet work transforms lives. People often beg for signs. They want immediate answers. But timing reveals more than symbols. God's schedule carries wisdom. Humans cannot see. Early blessings can harm growth. Delayed answers develop strength. God prepares the person before the promise. Timing protects purpose. Many signs appear only after waiting. What felt like silence becomes clarity. When the moment arrives, everything aligns naturally. Timing confirms God's involvement. Trust grows through waiting seasons. Faith matures without constant proof. God's timing builds endurance. Signs fade, but timing fulfills destiny. God often works where eyes cannot see. Hidden processes shape visible outcomes. While people focus on surface problems, God works deeper. His preparation happens quietly. Connections are formed without notice. Events align over time. Doors move without force. Behind every outcome is unseen guidance. Behind the scenes work removes future pain. God adjusts paths silently. What feels random is often intentional. Protection happens before danger appears. Trusting unseen work requires faith. Results appear later, not instantly. God's hidden work proves his care. Nothing is wasted in his plan. Many confuse divine direction with luck. Coincidence feels random. Divine guidance feels purposeful. One leads nowhere, the other leads forward. When events align repeatedly, meaning appears. Patterns form with clarity. Direction becomes consistent, not accidental. God uses repetition to confirm his will. Divine direction brings peace, not confusion. Even hard decisions feel right inside. Coincidences lack this assurance. God's guidance carries calm. Recognizing direction strengthens trust. Faith grows through awareness. Life feels guided, not chaotic. God does not leave destiny to chance. Confusion often feels like failure, but it is usually a signal of change. When old understanding breaks, space opens for new truth. God allows confusion to loosen false certainty. This stage prepares the mind for deeper wisdom. Many people panic during confusion. They rush decisions or seek shortcuts. This reaction delays clarity. God uses uncertainty to slow you down and reshape direction. Confusion exposes dependence. It reveals what you trust most. When answers disappear, faith is tested. God uses this moment to build reliance on Him, not on control. Clarity arrives quietly after confusion. Pieces begin to connect naturally. What once felt overwhelming starts to make sense. God never wastes confusion. He uses it as preparation. God's guidance often challenges comfort zones. Growth requires pressure. Comfort keeps people stagnant. God stretches faith by allowing discomfort. Uncomfortable seasons reveal hidden strength. Weak areas surface for healing. God exposes what needs change, not to harm, but to restore. This process feels difficult but necessary. Many mistake discomfort for abandonment. In truth, it is involvement. God reshapes character through resistance. Transformation rarely feels easy. Comfort returns after growth. Peace follows obedience. God uses discomfort to lead you higher. What feels heavy now creates freedom later. Expectations limit perception. When people demand specific outcomes, they miss divine alternatives. God's ways exceed human plans. Rigid expectations block awareness. Forcing personal timelines creates frustration. God operates beyond urgency. When expectations control faith, disappointment follows. Surrender opens understanding. God often answers differently than requested. The solution arrives in another form. Pride resists this shift. Humility recognizes wisdom beyond preference. Releasing control strengthens trust. Faith matures when expectations soften. God works best when allowed freedom. His plan always serves long-term good. Silence feels uncomfortable in a noisy world. Yet faith deepens there. Without constant signs, trust must stand alone. God uses silence to strengthen belief. During silence, distractions fade. Inner awareness sharpens. People learn to listen rather than demand. God speaks through stillness. Silence reveals motives. Faith without reward becomes genuine. God refines belief when nothing is visible. This season builds spiritual endurance. When silence ends, faith remains strong. Trust no longer depends on feelings. God's quiet seasons produce lasting confidence. God always begins with the heart. External change without inner alignment fails. Inner transformation prepares for visible blessing. God corrects inside first. Thought patterns shape outcomes. God renews the mind before changing circumstances. Without inner growth, success collapses. Preparation prevents destruction. Internal healing restores clarity. Old wounds affect decisions. God heals emotions before opening doors. Stability supports future responsibility. When inner change completes, external shifts follow. Life aligns naturally. God's order protects purpose. Inner work creates lasting results. Spiritual growth is quiet and steady. Emotional excitement is loud and temporary. Many confuse feelings with faith. God focuses on depth, not intensity. Excitement fades. When challenges appear, growth remains during pressure. God builds endurance, not hype. True faith stands when emotions fall. Spiritual growth changes behavior. Patience increases. Discipline strengthens. These signs last longer than excitement. God values consistency over bursts of passion. When emotions settle, growth continues. Faith becomes rooted. God's work shows through character, not reactions. This is lasting transformation. Delay often feels like rejection. People assume silence equals refusal, but God uses delay for preparation. Timing protects the promise. During delay, strength develops. Faith matures. God adjusts priorities. What arrives later carries greater impact. Delay increases readiness. Many blessings fail without delay. Early success can destroy discipline. God waits to build capacity. Delay prevents future regret. When the answer comes, clarity follows. Delay reveals purpose. God never forgets promises. Waiting shapes the receiver, not the gift. Pressure exposes weakness. It reveals areas needing growth. God uses pressure to strengthen faith. Resistance builds resilience. Without pressure, growth remains shallow. Comfort hides limits. God allows challenges to expand capacity. Strength forms under strain. Pressure refines focus. Distractions fade. Purpose sharpens. God uses stress to align priorities. Clarity comes through challenge. When preparation completes, pressure lifts. Strength remains. God never wastes struggle. Every challenge trains for future responsibility. Uncertainty creates fear, yet God remains present. He does not abandon during confusion. His guidance becomes subtle, not absent. During uncertainty, trust deepens. Faith grows without sight. God walks closely during doubt. Silence does not equal distance. Uncertain seasons slow life down. Reflection increases. God uses this time to teach dependence. Confidence shifts from control to trust. When certainty returns, faith is stronger. God's presence becomes clearer. Uncertainty reveals his closeness. He never leaves during transition. Awareness begins with mindset. Closed thinking blocks insight. God's signs require openness. Humility allows perception. Expecting only dramatic signs limits understanding. God often uses subtle signals. A prepared mindset notices patterns. Awareness grows gradually. Fear clouds recognition. Anxiety distorts meaning. God's signs bring peace, not panic. Calm thinking reveals guidance. When mindset aligns with faith, clarity increases. Signs become visible. God communicates consistently. Readiness determines recognition. A deeper awareness of right and wrong begins to develop quietly. Things that once felt normal now feel uncomfortable. Your conscience becomes sharper. This is not guilt. It is guidance forming inside you. You start to pause before decisions. Actions carry weight now. Words matter more than before. God is training your inner compass. This awareness does not come from fear. It comes from alignment. You feel drawn to what is good and lasting. Harmful choices lose appeal. This change shows God working close to your heart. He reshapes values before changing circumstances. Inner clarity becomes your new foundation. Feeling guided without clear answers can be confusing at first. You move forward without full understanding. Yet something inside feels steady. God leads step by step. You may not see the whole path. Still, the next move feels right. This quiet direction builds trust. Faith grows without complete control. God often withholds full clarity to grow dependence. If everything were known, trust would weaken. Partial guidance keeps the connection alive. Over time, you realize the direction was accurate. Each step protected you. God guided you even when logic failed. A strong pull toward prayer or reflection starts to rise. You feel drawn to quiet moments. Noise becomes tiring. Stillness feels necessary. This desire does not feel forced. It feels natural. God invites you closer without pressure. Communication shifts from asking to listening. Prayer becomes less about words. Reflection becomes deeper. God speaks through calm thoughts and gentle nudges. Awareness increases. This pull is a sign of closeness. God calls attention inward. Relationship deepens before results appear. Discomfort with old habits begins to grow. Things you once enjoyed feel empty. Routine behaviors lose satisfaction. God highlights what no longer fits. This discomfort is not punishment. It is redirection. God removes pleasure from habits that block growth. Change begins internally. Letting go feels hard at first. Familiar patterns resist release. Yet peace follows obedience. Freedom replaces attachment. This shift proves God is active. He clears space for better things. Old habits fade to make room for purpose. Losing interest in constant distractions becomes noticeable. Endless scrolling feels draining. Noise no longer entertains. Focus starts to sharpen. God reduces appetite for things that waste energy. Attention becomes valuable. Time feels important again. Purpose begins to surface. This change creates space for clarity. When distractions fade, direction appears. God simplifies to strengthen awareness. A focused mind hears guidance clearly. God removes clutter before revealing direction. Silence becomes productive. Sensitivity to words, thoughts, and actions increases. You notice impact more clearly. Casual negativity feels heavy. God refines awareness. You begin choosing words carefully. Thoughts carry responsibility. God teaches stewardship of the mind. Discipline grows quietly. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is maturity. God sharpens perception to protect your spirit. Awareness guards peace. Through this process, character strengthens. God works closely when inner discipline forms naturally. Feeling corrected without feeling condemned is a powerful sign. Mistakes bring clarity, not shame. God teaches without crushing identity. Correction feels loving, not harsh. You understand why change is needed. Growth feels safe. God corrects to restore, not reject. Condemnation pushes away. Correction draws closer. God's guidance lifts instead of shames. Confidence remains intact. This balance shows God's closeness. He guides gently. Correction becomes proof of care. Inner peace, after hard decisions, becomes more frequent. Choices feel heavy at first, then calm follows. God confirms direction internally, even when outcomes are uncertain. Peace remains. This peace does not depend on approval. It comes from alignment. God confirms obedience with peace. Fear fades after surrender. Calm replaces doubt slowly. This peace is evidence of guidance. God reassures after trust is shown. Direction settles the heart. A growing desire for truth begins to shape thinking. Surface answers no longer satisfy. You seek depth and honesty. God awakens discernment. Truth becomes more important than comfort. You question assumptions. God encourages understanding over tradition. This hunger reshapes priorities. Learning becomes purposeful. Wisdom replaces opinions. God refines thinking. Truth leads to freedom. God draws you closer through clarity. Knowledge aligns with purpose. Awareness of spiritual growth becomes noticeable over time. You respond differently than before. Patience replaces reaction. God matures character. Progress feels subtle but consistent. Old triggers lose power. Emotional control strengthens. God develops stability. Growth becomes visible in choices. Calm replaces impulse. Strength replaces fear. God shapes behavior quietly. This awareness confirms God's work. Growth proves presence. Transformation becomes evidence. Wanting alignment instead of attention marks inner maturity. Recognition loses importance. Purpose matters more. God shifts motivation. You stop chasing approval. Validation no longer controls decisions. God teaches self-worth through alignment. This shift creates peace. Comparison fades. Confidence becomes internal. God removes dependence on praise. Alignment brings clarity. God works closely when motives are purified. Feeling watched over instead of controlled brings comfort. Guidance feels protective, not restrictive. God leads without force. Freedom remains intact. Choice still exists, yet direction feels present. God respects free will while offering care. This balance builds trust. Guidance feels safe. God allows growth through choice. Protection without pressure shows closeness. God guards gently. Quiet confidence begins replacing fear. Panic decreases. Assurance grows without explanation. God strengthens inner security. Confidence does not come from success. It comes from trust. God builds stability before results. Fear loses authority. Calm responses become normal. God restores emotional balance. This confidence proves inner work. God establishes strength before promotion. Discernment becomes sharper over time. You sense situations clearly. Confusion fades faster. God refines perception. You recognize truth quickly. Deception stands out. God trains awareness. This clarity prevents unnecessary pain. Discernment protects peace. God equips wisely. Sharpened discernment is a gift. God prepares you for responsibility. Conviction without shame continues guiding choices. Mistakes teach instead of crush. God strengthens identity. Learning replaces fear. Correction improves direction. God builds resilience. Shame fades as growth increases. Confidence remains intact. God heals through guidance. This process proves closeness. God corrects lovingly. Awareness of purpose increases gradually. Life feels intentional. Direction forms slowly. God aligns focus. Random actions decrease. Meaning increases. God connects passion with calling. Purpose clarifies decisions. Energy feels directed. God sharpens vision. This awareness confirms guidance. God reveals purpose step by step. Moral clarity strengthens decision-making. Confusion fades. Choices feel cleaner. God defines boundaries. Compromise feels uncomfortable. Integrity becomes natural. God builds character. Clear morals protect future success. God prevents self-sabotage. This strength signals preparation. God builds foundations. Choosing peace over chaos becomes intentional. Drama loses appeal. Calm feels valuable. God retrains priorities. You step back instead of reacting. Wisdom replaces impulse. God slows responses. Peace becomes a decision. God teaches emotional mastery. This change shows growth. God strengthens inner control. Listening more than speaking becomes natural. Silence holds value. Understanding deepens. God teaches restraint. Words become intentional. Reactions soften. God shapes communication. Listening reveals wisdom. God increases insight through patience. This shift marks maturity. God trains leadership quietly. Understanding before action becomes important. Impulse fades. Thoughtfulness increases. God builds wisdom. Decisions slow, but strengthen. Outcomes improve. God values preparation. Action gains purpose. Mistakes decrease. God teaches foresight. This approach shows guidance. God leads through wisdom. Plans falling apart unexpectedly feel painful. Structure collapses. Control disappears. God interrupts for protection. What fails now saves future pain. God removes weak foundations. Loss creates space. At first, frustration dominates. Later, understanding follows. God blocks harm quietly. This disruption signals involvement. God redirects through disruption. Doors closing without explanation cause confusion. Opportunities vanish suddenly. God withholds clarity initially. Closed doors prevent misalignment. God sees outcomes unseen. Protection hides in denial. Time reveals reason. Peace follows acceptance. God leads a way to lead forward. Closure confirms guidance. God blocks to bless. Delays that protect you feel unfair. Waiting tests patience. God slows momentum intentionally. Early arrival could damage growth. God delays to prepare character. Protection often looks like waiting. God guards destiny through timing. Delay proves care. God values long-term success. Being stopped from harmful paths creates frustration. Progress halts, resistance appears. God intervenes. What feels blocked hides danger. God prevents damage before impact. Trust grows through obedience. God saves without explanation. Prevention proves closeness. God protects quietly. Frustration that later makes sense teaches trust. Anger fades with clarity. God reveals purpose over time. Moments once questioned gain meaning. God connects outcomes gently. Growth requires hindsight. God teaches patience. Understanding confirms guidance. God always knew the way. Missed opportunities that later save you often feel disappointing at first. You may wonder why certain chances slipped away. God sometimes closes doors to protect you from harm that you cannot yet see. These missed moments are not mistakes but divine interventions. At the time, it is normal to feel regret or confusion. You may question timing or fairness. Yet over weeks or months, understanding begins to emerge. What was lost prevents a future mistake or pain. God's protection is subtle. He often uses circumstances beyond your control to redirect your path. It is not about punishment, but about safeguarding your journey toward purpose. When reflection arrives, clarity shines. You realize the missed opportunity kept you from something far worse. God's guidance works quietly, ensuring your steps align with His greater plan. Redirection without warning can feel jarring. Suddenly, paths you expected are blocked, or events move differently than planned. God intervenes to steer your life toward alignment with your ultimate purpose. This redirection often comes without explanation. It can feel frustrating or even unfair. However, God's wisdom always surpasses human understanding. Trusting the process becomes essential. The subtle guidance in these moments strengthens your reliance on God. You learn to adapt, to wait, and to be patient. Each detour is intentional, protecting you from what you do not yet comprehend. Later, you see the pieces fit perfectly. What once seemed like an obstacle now appears as a stepping stone. God's quiet redirections prepare you for greater blessings ahead. Forced pauses in your plans can feel uncomfortable. You might feel eager to move forward, but find doors unexpectedly closed. God often slows you down to create space for preparation, reflection, and growth. These pauses are essential for alignment. Without them, you may rush decisions or take unwise paths. God's timing is deliberate. And patience during these periods is part of the spiritual training He provides. During this waiting, you may feel restless. It is natural to struggle with inaction. Yet God is working behind the scenes, arranging events, people, and circumstances for your benefit. When the pause ends, progress comes with clarity and purpose. Decisions feel lighter, steps feel surer, and outcomes align more closely with God's plan. Patience becomes a hallmark of faith. Feeling blocked but protected can be confusing. Obstacles may appear where you expected smooth progress. Yet these same barriers often shield you from harm or missteps that you cannot foresee. God's protection can feel invisible. You do not always understand the reasons for these roadblocks at the moment. Faith is required to trust that something better is being prepared. These experiences teach discernment. You learn not every open path is safe, and not every closed door is denial. God's interventions may feel inconvenient, but are always purposeful. Reflection eventually reveals the wisdom in being blocked. What seemed like frustration transforms into gratitude. God's guidance always works in your favor, even when hidden. God removing what no longer serves you can feel unsettling. Certain relationships, habits, or opportunities may fade without explanation. God is pruning your life to focus on what is meaningful and aligned with your purpose. Letting go may cause temporary pain. Human instinct resists change, but God's pruning ensures future growth. By clearing space, He makes room for blessings that truly matter. This process strengthens character. You learn to detach from comfort, control, and unnecessary attachment. God's intervention encourages reliance on faith rather than circumstance. In time, the removal becomes a blessing. New opportunities, peace and clarity fill the gaps. God's work is strategic, preparing you for a higher purpose. Lessons hidden in rejection can be powerful. When people say no or doors close, it often feels like failure. God uses rejection as a tool to teach patience, resilience, and discernment. Rejection may protect you from people or paths that would harm your growth. Each no serves a higher purpose, redirecting you toward what is best for your life. The lessons are often subtle. You may only recognize them later when patterns emerge and clarity dawns. Rejection reveals your priorities, strengthens faith, and builds humility. Over time, these experiences refine your heart and choices. God's protection and teaching become evident. What once seemed painful now appears essential. Unanswered prayers with hidden mercy can be difficult to accept. You may feel ignored or abandoned. Yet God's timing ensures that what comes is best for your life. Immediate answers are not always beneficial. Mercy often comes through restraint. God withholds certain things to prevent harm, teach patience, or cultivate growth. The absence of an answer is not denial but protection. Faith deepens during this period. You learn to trust God's wisdom over your desires. Waiting teaches endurance and reliance on Him rather than circumstances. When answers eventually arrive, they surpass expectations. You realize that delay and mercy were intertwined. God's plan is wiser than any immediate fulfillment. Protection disguised as disappointment is a subtle sign of God's work. What feels like failure or setback often shields you from harm you cannot yet perceive. God's hand moves quietly in these moments. Disappointment challenges patience. Human instincts push toward frustration or blame. Yet reflection often reveals that the setback prevented mistakes or harm. Through this process, reliance on God increases. You learn to trust Him over appearances. Not every negative outcome is permanent. Some are protective in disguise. Eventually, you see the blessings within the disappointment. Circumstances align, lessons are learned, and protection is confirmed. God's work is deliberate, even when hidden. God steering you away quietly can feel mysterious. Choices and events may subtly redirect you. You may not notice it immediately, but His guidance is active in the background. These quiet nudges teach reliance. When you follow intuition or peace, doors open in alignment with His will. Ignoring these cues may lead to unnecessary struggle. Steering often comes through circumstances, people, or internal conviction. God uses multiple layers of guidance to protect and prepare you for success. Later, the redirection becomes clear. Paths that seemed blocked initially were only protection. God's gentle steering keeps you on the safest and most rewarding path. Losing things that would hurt you later is a protective act of God. When possessions, relationships, or plans disappear, it can feel devastating at first. Yet God's wisdom is evident over time. Loss creates opportunities for growth. Space opens for clarity, focus, and alignment. God removes what distracts or hinders purpose. This process teaches detachment. You learn to value spiritual direction over temporary satisfaction. Reliance on God replaces dependence on circumstances. Eventually, what is lost reveals its purpose. Safety, freedom, and peace emerge. God's interventions protect your life in ways you cannot always see. Changes you didn't ask for often feel unsettling. Life shifts without warning. Yet these changes are strategic. God reshapes circumstances to align with His plan. Unexpected change teaches flexibility. Resistance fades as understanding grows. You learn to trust God's wisdom over your own plans. These moments challenge reliance. You cannot control outcomes, only choices. God builds patience, faith, and discernment through change. Over time, unexpected change reveals blessings. Doors open, clarity emerges, and alignment becomes obvious. God's hand is always active. Resistance that leads to growth can feel painful. Challenges, obstacles, and opposition often appear when you pursue progress. God allows resistance to strengthen your spiritual and personal character. Pressure tests faith. It reveals hidden weaknesses and builds endurance. Resistance sharpens skills, refines decisions, and deepens trust. The discomfort of opposition teaches lessons you cannot learn otherwise. God transforms struggle into preparation, shaping resilience and wisdom. Eventually, you recognize growth. Resistance was never random, it was deliberate. God's work strengthens you, preparing for greater success. God reshaping your direction often happens in subtle ways. Life may not go according to plan, but each deviation is intentional. He adjusts your path to maximize purpose and blessing. These shifts may feel confusing initially. Plans fail, or opportunities change unexpectedly. Yet God's redirection ensures alignment with long-term growth. Through patience and reflection, clarity emerges. You see, that changes protected you, cultivated readiness, and opened better options. This divine shaping proves His closeness. God works behind the scenes, guiding every step, preparing for outcomes beyond your imagination. Detours that build character are often necessary. Life rarely follows a straight line. God introduces detours to refine patience, endurance, and wisdom. Though detours feel inconvenient, they are intentional. Lessons are embedded in unexpected pathways. Skills, perspective, and faith grow through the process. Detours prevent rash decisions. They allow preparation and insight. God ensures that when you return to the main path, you are stronger and more prepared. Reflection later shows that detours were blessings in disguise. God's work becomes evident through the strengthened character and prepared life. Trust growing through uncertainty is a key sign of God's work. When outcomes are unclear, faith is tested. Reliance on God increases when human understanding fails. Uncertainty develops patience. It reduces impulsive decisions and builds endurance. God uses unknowns to teach reliance on His wisdom rather than personal insight. Through this process, peace replaces anxiety. You begin to trust that God's timing and plan are perfect, even when circumstances seem chaotic. Later, clarity arrives and trust proves its worth. God's presence is evident and your faith becomes deeper, anchored in experience rather than theory. Feeling alone even around people is part of spiritual preparation. Isolation allows focus on growth without distraction. God often works in solitude to refine character. Social noise fades and inner awareness increases. God teaches lessons of patience, self-reliance, and trust during these periods. Loneliness can feel heavy, but it strengthens faith. Dependence shifts from external validation to internal guidance. Over time, this isolation produces clarity and confidence. God's presence becomes more tangible in moments of stillness. Distance from familiar relationships may cause discomfort. People drift away naturally. God removes connections that hinder spiritual or personal development. Separation is often protective. Old patterns, habits, or influences can block progress. God ensures that your environment aligns with your purpose. This distance encourages reflection and personal responsibility. You begin to rely more on God and less on others for direction. Eventually, new relationships emerge that support growth. God's strategic removal of old ties proves His involvement. Losing connection with old circles signals transformation. Friendships may fade as priorities change. God ensures your environment aligns with your purpose. Old connections may limit vision or foster distraction. Separation encourages growth and focus on what truly matters. Distance brings clarity. You recognize which relationships are beneficial and which hinder progress. New purposeful relationships often appear naturally. God orchestrates social alignment to support spiritual and personal evolution. Silence replacing noise becomes a necessary pattern. Internal reflection replaces external distraction. God uses quiet moments to refine focus, perception, and understanding. Noise can mask spiritual signals. Silence clears the mind, allowing God's guidance to be recognized. Peace grows amidst stillness. Reflection strengthens character. Choices become intentional, not reactive. God shapes awareness and wisdom through quiet seasons. Silence teaches patience, trust, and attentiveness. Spiritual clarity emerges, revealing God's subtle yet consistent presence. Less tolerance for shallow conversations indicates spiritual maturity. God reshapes priorities, emphasizing depth over triviality. Superficial interactions feel draining. You seek meaningful discussions that encourage growth. Wisdom and insight become more valuable than small talk. God elevates awareness and discernment. This change improves focus and energy. Time is spent wisely. Spiritual and personal alignment increase through conscious communication. Eventually, your social circle becomes intentional. Relationships grow purposeful. God's guidance in social choices becomes clear. Needing time alone more often becomes noticeable. Crowds, noise, and constant activity feel draining. God uses solitude to foster reflection and inner growth. This period allows you to reconnect with purpose without external influence. In solitude, thoughts and priorities become clearer. You start noticing patterns in behavior and choices that were previously hidden. God creates space for self-awareness and spiritual insight. Time alone is not loneliness, but preparation. It teaches patience, focus, and reliance on God rather than external validation. Internal guidance strengthens during these quiet moments. Eventually, solitude becomes comforting. You begin to recognize God's presence even in stillness. This private growth sets the foundation for external impact later. Separation for spiritual focus often feels uncomfortable. Relationships, routines, or activities may fade naturally. God intentionally redirects attention inward to refine the heart and align priorities. During separation, distractions decrease. You develop clarity about values, purpose, and spiritual direction. God works to remove anything that hinders growth, creating a fertile environment for development. This process strengthens resilience. Detachment from comfort zones encourages reliance on faith rather than circumstance. Emotional stability grows alongside spiritual maturity. Over time, separation produces alignment. Your life begins to reflect intentionality, wisdom, and focus. God's guidance becomes more evident through the patterns of change. God removing distractions creates space for focus. Noise, unnecessary obligations, and unhealthy influences fade. This allows attention to shift toward what truly matters, spiritually and personally. Distractions often block awareness of divine guidance. When removed, patterns, opportunities, and subtle signs become more visible. God's hand becomes clearer in everyday life. You begin to value time and energy differently. Priorities realign naturally. Patience and concentration increase as God's work takes center stage internally. Eventually, life feels lighter and more purposeful. Freedom from distraction enhances clarity and focus. God's work becomes unmistakable when attention is no longer divided. Isolation as preparation can feel challenging at first. You may feel cut off or misunderstood. God uses this season to strengthen resolve, refine character, and prepare you for the responsibilities ahead. During this preparation, growth occurs privately. Skills, faith, and wisdom deepen unnoticed by others. God works silently, ensuring readiness for upcoming opportunities. The absence of external validation enhances self-reliance. You learn to trust internal guidance and spiritual intuition more than approval from others. Eventually, isolation produces confidence, clarity, and focus. When the time comes, you emerge stronger and more prepared. God's strategic work becomes evident in results. Growth happening privately can feel slow and invisible. You may not see immediate results, yet God is strengthening your mind, heart, and faith behind the scenes. Private growth teaches patience and endurance. You learn to measure progress internally rather than seeking external recognition or comparison. Skills, wisdom, and spiritual maturity accumulate quietly. God ensures that growth is solid and lasting, not superficial or temporary. Later, the evidence of this growth becomes clear. Achievements, relationships, and purpose align naturally. God's hand is evident in the foundations built in silence. Comfort zones breaking often feels unsettling. God pushes boundaries, exposing weaknesses and limitations that must be addressed for true growth to occur. Breaking comfort zones challenges dependence on ease and familiarity. You begin to face fears, overcome inertia, and build resilience through faith. This process strengthens character. Challenges become lessons. Discomfort becomes preparation, and confidence grows. God works through pressure to refine potential. Eventually, breaking comfort zones expands opportunities. You move with freedom and awareness, capable of embracing larger purpose. God's work becomes evident in the transformation. Old bonds naturally fading can feel painful. Relationships, friendships, or habits may lose meaning. God allows this to create space for new alignment with purpose and growth. As old bonds fade, energy and focus shift toward what truly matters. You learn to invest in relationships and opportunities that contribute to spiritual and personal development. The fading process teaches detachment and discernment. You begin to recognize which connections are supportive and which are limiting. Over time, the gaps left by fading bonds make room for meaningful relationships and opportunities. God's guidance ensures alignment with long-term purpose. Becoming selective with energy shows spiritual maturity. You no longer respond to every demand or distraction. God encourages focus on growth, purpose, and meaningful engagement. Prioritizing energy allows more intentional action. Time is spent wisely. Decisions are deliberate, and spiritual practices deepen. God shapes focus through discernment. This selectivity strengthens resilience. You avoid unnecessary conflicts, drains, or distractions. Awareness of priorities becomes instinctive. Eventually, intentional energy use enhances results, clarity, and spiritual alignment. God's work is amplified when attention is focused where it matters most. Solitude strengthening faith is a key sign of divine work. Time alone fosters reflection, deep listening, and internal trust. God uses quiet moments to build reliance on Him. In solitude, doubts are confronted, patterns are revealed, and convictions are deepened. Faith grows without external validation, proving its authenticity. This strengthening prepares for challenges ahead. Spiritual discipline, patience, and discernment become natural responses. God equips for greater responsibilities. Eventually, faith manifests externally with confidence, clarity, and alignment. God's preparation in solitude ensures readiness for future purpose. Learning without validation becomes essential. You grow through internal reflection, discipline, and observation. God teaches lessons that do not rely on praise or approval. Self-driven learning fosters independence. You understand that progress is internal and not dependent on recognition. Growth becomes authentic and durable. This process strengthens trust in God's guidance. Validation shifts from people to spiritual insight, ensuring clarity and alignment with purpose. Eventually, external results reflect internal work. God's hand is evident in outcomes, demonstrating preparation and wisdom cultivated in private. Identity being refined occurs subtly. Experiences, challenges, and lessons remove false perceptions. God reshapes values, priorities, and self-understanding. This refinement allows alignment with purpose. Old habits, limiting beliefs, and false attachments fade naturally. God works to produce authenticity and clarity. Refined identity strengthens decision-making and resilience. You act from conviction rather than fear or societal expectation. Over time, your life aligns with God's vision. Confidence, clarity, and purpose emerge. Identity reflects divine shaping. Less approval-seeking behavior becomes noticeable. Validation from others loses significance. God strengthens self-trust and reliance on spiritual guidance. This shift allows focus on purpose rather than external recognition. Decisions become intentional and values-driven. Internal confidence grows. Fear of judgment diminishes, replaced by assurance in God's guidance. Eventually, independence and trust in God produce clarity, alignment, and impactful action. Approval is sought from God, not people. Inner work increasing becomes evident through reflection and self-awareness. Thoughts, patterns, and decisions are examined deeply. God strengthens character internally before external outcomes appear. This inner work develops patience, discernment, and stability. Growth occurs consistently, even if unnoticed externally. Faith becomes stronger as internal alignment improves. Choices reflect wisdom rather than impulsivity or fear. Eventually, the results of inner work manifest externally. Life aligns with purpose, demonstrating God's deliberate preparation. Purpose becoming clearer is a natural result of spiritual refinement. Experiences, lessons, and divine guidance shape understanding. God reveals vision gradually, layer by layer. Clarity of purpose focuses energy, decisions, and attention. Distractions lose importance, and alignment increases. This process develops confidence in choices. Direction feels intuitive and stable. God ensures readiness before revealing greater paths. Eventually, purpose manifests externally in meaningful action, relationships, and achievements. God's plan unfolds predictably when readiness aligns with clarity. God-shaping character in silence prepares you for future responsibilities. Challenges, solitude, and internal reflection refine resilience, patience, and wisdom. These silent seasons teach endurance. You develop the ability to navigate adversity without external support. God strengthens internal capacities. Character shaping influences decisions and relationships. Internal alignment allows external actions to reflect purpose, integrity, and faith. When opportunities arise, preparedness is evident. God's guidance becomes unmistakable in the strength, wisdom, and clarity you carry. Sudden challenges appearing can feel overwhelming. Problems arise unexpectedly. God allows these to reveal strength, refine patience, and test faith. Challenges expose areas needing growth. They push you beyond comfort zones, requiring reliance on God and spiritual discernment. Through these moments, resilience is built. You learn to respond with faith rather than fear, trust rather than panic. Eventually, challenges transform into milestones of growth. God's presence is confirmed through guidance, strength, and enduring results. Resistance, when you try to grow, can feel discouraging. People, situations, or circumstances push back unexpectedly. God uses opposition to refine determination and wisdom. Resistance teaches endurance. It shows the strength of conviction and commitment. Challenges become tools for preparation. Through adversity, patience and discernment increase. God ensures that growth is solid, intentional, and resilient. Later, reflection reveals that resistance was protective. God shaped character and direction through obstacles, confirming his active work. Mental pressure, increasing signals, spiritual refinement. Stress, doubt, and challenge test faith and decision-making. God uses mental strain to cultivate clarity and reliance on him. Pressure reveals weaknesses and strengthens resolve. You learn to think critically, act wisely, and trust internally rather than externally. These moments teach focus, resilience, and discernment. Mental tension becomes a training ground for spiritual growth. Eventually, mental pressure resolves into wisdom and preparedness. God's work produces clarity and strength through difficulty. Doubt attacking your peace can feel intense. Uncertainty arises unexpectedly. God allows doubts to surface to test trust, build faith, and refine discernment. When doubt appears, reliance on God rather than circumstance strengthens. Faith is deepened. Internal focus sharpened. Over time, confidence and clarity return. Doubt transforms into a tool for growth, teaching patience and spiritual maturity. God's presence becomes evident as trust solidifies. Doubt becomes a stepping stone, not a barrier, in His plan. Feeling tested emotionally is a subtle sign of divine work. Trials provoke feelings that challenge patience, empathy, and faith. God uses emotions to reveal priorities and maturity. Emotional tests expose inner weaknesses, teaching resilience and awareness. Reactions become intentional rather than impulsive. Through these experiences, emotional intelligence strengthens. Spiritual growth becomes intertwined with personal development. Eventually, emotional challenges produce wisdom, balance, and maturity. God's guidance is confirmed through strengthened character and clarity. A growing awareness of divine timing becomes noticeable. Events unfold differently than expected, yet each moment aligns perfectly. God orchestrates circumstances to ensure outcomes occur at the right moment. Patience becomes essential. You may feel anxious when things are delayed or take unexpected turns. God uses these delays to refine trust, strengthen faith, and teach perseverance. Every pause carries a hidden purpose. Over time, patterns emerge, revealing that nothing happens randomly. What seemed frustrating or unclear was part of a larger plan. God's timing ensures that readiness matches opportunity. Eventually, understanding replaces doubt. You recognize the wisdom behind every delay and redirection. Divine timing confirms that God is working closely in your life. Small victories begin to feel significant. Achievements that once seemed minor now carry weight, reflecting growth and alignment. God celebrates these subtle successes to encourage and guide you. These small wins often occur quietly, without attention or recognition. They build momentum, confidence, and spiritual maturity. God works in the details before the big breakthroughs. Acknowledging these victories strengthens faith. You learn to trust progress over perfection and growth over immediate results. God emphasizes the journey as much as the destination. Eventually, these minor wins accumulate into larger success. You see evidence of God's guidance in how small steps lead to meaningful transformation. A sense of peace amid uncertainty signals God's presence. Even when circumstances seem chaotic, calmness emerges internally. This peace is a subtle but powerful sign of divine guidance. During uncertainty, fear and doubt may arise, yet a quiet assurance persists, guiding decisions and actions. God cultivates trust by sustaining peace when outcomes are unclear. This peace strengthens faith and patience. It teaches reliance on God rather than circumstances. You begin to notice subtle signs and patterns that confirm His involvement. Eventually, clarity arrives, and the peace becomes a foundation for future decisions. God's work is evident in the calm that carries you through challenging situations. Sudden clarity after confusion is a frequent sign of God working. Moments that once seemed unclear become obvious, and understanding emerges naturally. God orchestrates timing to reveal insight. During confusion, decisions may feel overwhelming. God allows this uncertainty to sharpen discernment and strengthen reliance on Him rather than immediate understanding. This clarity often comes in small increments, gradually building until the bigger picture becomes visible. Subtle signs, guidance, and coincidences confirm divine intervention. Eventually, the clarity solidifies and confidence in direction grows. You recognize God's hand in leading you through confusion toward understanding. A desire to help others without reward becomes noticeable. Compassion rises naturally. And you find yourself drawn to support others. God cultivates empathy as part of spiritual growth. Acts of kindness feel instinctive, not forced. You recognize the value of serving others without expecting recognition. God uses this inclination to shape character and purpose. Helping others strengthens faith and humility. You learn patience, understanding, and discernment through service. God's guidance manifests through generosity and care. Eventually, your actions align with divine purpose. Opportunities to serve create meaningful impact, reflecting God's work in your life. Intuition growing stronger is a subtle yet clear sign of God's presence. You begin to sense decisions, opportunities, or dangers before they manifest externally. Spiritual awareness increases. Intuition does not always make logical sense, yet it feels reliable. God cultivates discernment through reflection, prayer, and experience, sharpening perception. This strengthened intuition guides choices and prevents mistakes. Subtle nudges and internal confirmations become more frequent as reliance on God deepens. Eventually, intuition aligns with external outcomes. God's guidance is confirmed, and you recognize that internal awareness has been sharpened intentionally. Unexpected blessings appear when least anticipated. Small favors, opportunities, or resources arise without explanation. God demonstrates provision through these timely interventions. These blessings often go unnoticed at first. They may seem coincidental but serve a greater purpose. God uses these moments to encourage faith and recognize His work. Acknowledging these blessings cultivates gratitude and awareness. You begin to notice patterns and subtle confirmations of divine involvement. Eventually, these blessings compound, creating momentum in life. God's hand is evident in the alignment of timing, provision, and purpose. Guidance through challenges becomes more evident. When faced with obstacles, solutions or insights emerge unexpectedly. God directs problem solving in ways beyond your understanding. Challenges may feel overwhelming, yet subtle opportunities or signs lead to resolution. God works behind the scenes, ensuring outcomes align with long-term purpose. These solutions often teach lessons beyond the immediate problem. Skills, patience, and resilience are strengthened in the process, preparing you for future challenges. Eventually, reflection reveals that every obstacle was an opportunity for divine teaching. God's guidance is confirmed through both the process and the outcome. A shift in priorities naturally occurs. What once felt urgent loses importance. God rearranges focus toward what truly matters, aligning life with purpose and spiritual growth. This shift encourages clarity in decision-making. Distractions fade, and energy is directed toward meaningful goals. God emphasizes significance over busyness. Prioritizing wisely strengthens faith and internal guidance. Decisions reflect values, long-term impact, and divine alignment rather than immediate gratification. Eventually, life flows with intentionality. God's work becomes visible in the consistent alignment of actions, choices, and outcomes with purpose. Faith strengthening during trials is a prominent sign of divine work. Difficulties test resolve, patience, and reliance on God. Challenges become instruments for spiritual development. Trials reveal resilience, adaptability, and trust. God allows adversity to cultivate faith that does not depend on circumstance or comfort. Through trials, wisdom and discernment develop. Solutions arise, peace persists, and patience deepens. God's guidance is experienced through endurance. Eventually, overcoming trials confirms growth and divine involvement. Faith becomes steadfast, character strengthens, and outcomes reflect intentional preparation. Feelings of guidance through subtle coincidences increase. Events, conversations, or patterns seem orchestrated to point the way. God communicates through alignment and synchronicity. These coincidences may initially seem random, but carry meaningful direction. Trusting them teaches discernment and faith. Over time, patterns emerge consistently. Internal confirmation aligns with external circumstances, strengthening confidence in decisions. Eventually, these subtle signs reveal intentional guidance. God's presence is unmistakable in the cumulative alignment of events and awareness. Emotional resilience grows without notice. Reactions that once caused overwhelm now stabilize naturally. God works internally to strengthen the mind and heart. Resilience allows challenges to become opportunities. Emotional balance prevents poor decisions and fosters reflection, patience, and clarity. This internal stability builds trust in God's guidance. Actions and reactions become deliberate rather than impulsive, reflecting spiritual maturity. Eventually, this resilience produces consistency in decision-making and life outcomes. God's work manifests through the steady growth of character. A subtle increase in gratitude signals divine activity. Appreciation for life, people, and circumstances becomes more natural. God nurtures a heart attuned to blessings. Gratitude shifts focus from lack to abundance. Recognition of small signs of provision and protection becomes habitual, enhancing awareness of God's presence. This practice strengthens faith and patience. Gratitude reinforces trust, reduces anxiety, and magnifies spiritual perception. Eventually, consistent gratitude reveals patterns of divine intervention. Life aligns with purpose, and blessings become more apparent. God fostering patience through delay becomes noticeable. Waiting periods are often uncomfortable, yet they cultivate endurance, faith, and wisdom for future opportunities. Patience allows you to avoid hasty decisions and align with divine timing. God ensures readiness before providing the next step. Through delays, discernment improves. You notice subtle cues, patterns, and confirmations that were previously overlooked, enhancing spiritual awareness. Eventually, patience leads to optimal outcomes. The timing of blessings and guidance reflects God's active involvement and wisdom. Encounters with meaningful mentors or guides appear at critical times. God positions people strategically to provide wisdom, support, and insight during pivotal moments. These encounters are often unexpected but serve long-term development. Guidance may be subtle, appearing in advice, encouragement, or perspective shifts. Trusting mentors and absorbing lessons cultivates growth. God orchestrates these connections to ensure alignment with purpose and preparation for challenges. Eventually, the influence of mentors becomes evident. Paths clarify, understanding deepens, and God's hand is unmistakable in the timing and impact of these relationships. Intense focus on personal growth arises naturally. You feel compelled to improve spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. God nurtures this focus to prepare for greater responsibility. This focus drives reflection, learning, and deliberate action. Habits, mindset, and priorities are adjusted in alignment with divine guidance. Persistent effort and self-awareness reinforce growth. God strengthens resolve to ensure readiness for future purpose. Eventually, consistent personal development produces noticeable results. Life aligns with intention, confirming God's work in shaping growth. God's strengthening discernment becomes evident. Choices in relationships are evaluated more clearly. You instinctively sense which directions align with purpose and which do not. This refinement prevents mistakes and fosters confidence. Subtle signals and internal nudges guide decision-making. Discernment develops over time through experience, reflection, and listening to God. Trust deepens as clarity increases. Eventually, decisions reflect wisdom, alignment, and purpose. God's guidance is confirmed in the outcomes of thoughtful, discerning action. A heightened sense of responsibility emerges naturally. You feel accountable not only for yourself, but also for the impact of your actions. God uses this to build character and integrity. Responsibility encourages intentional behavior. Decisions are weighed carefully, consequences considered, and guidance sought through prayer and reflection. This sense of accountability strengthens faith. You learn to act with foresight, aligning personal choices with God's will and long-term purpose. Eventually, responsibility produces stability, credibility, and spiritual maturity. God's work is evident in the thoughtful stewardship of life. Moments of unexpected clarity during prayer or reflection demonstrate God's close work. Answers emerge subtly. Guidance becomes evident, and understanding deepens. These moments teach trust and attentiveness. You learn to recognize the quiet confirmations that align with divine purpose. Clarity reinforces reliance on God. Faith grows stronger as subtle insights provide direction and peace. Eventually, these experiences reveal that spiritual awareness is being cultivated. God's hand is unmistakable in the growth of discernment and confidence. A growing alignment between actions and purpose indicates God's presence. Choices begin to reflect values, faith, and long-term direction. God orchestrates circumstances to reinforce alignment. This alignment encourages consistency, integrity, and deliberate behavior. Outcomes increasingly mirror spiritual preparation and insight. Consistency strengthens trust in God's plan. Actions become intentional rather than reactive, reflecting internal growth and divine guidance. Eventually, life flows with coherence and purpose. God's work is evident in the harmonious alignment of decisions, opportunities, and spiritual awareness. God-teaching contentment becomes noticeable. You begin to appreciate what you have, rather than focus on what is missing. This awareness nurtures peace, gratitude, and spiritual maturity. Contentment shifts perspective. You learn to trust God's provision and timing, recognizing that your current season has purpose. Life feels richer, even without immediate change. This process encourages patience and faith. You realize that striving without alignment may create anxiety, while acceptance opens doors to divine guidance. Eventually, contentment strengthens decision-making and emotional resilience. God's work is visible in the calm and confidence that contentment brings. A growing sense of purpose emerges from reflection and prayer. Life starts feeling intentional, and small decisions align with a bigger vision. God illuminates your path slowly, layer by layer. Purpose clarifies priorities. You begin to invest time, energy, and resources in what truly matters, while distractions fade naturally. Spiritual growth deepens as awareness sharpens. This clarity fosters confidence and motivation. You act with intentionality, knowing your choices are guided. God ensures that focus precedes opportunity. Eventually, alignment between purpose and action produces visible results. God's involvement becomes evident as life moves with precision and meaning. Subtle protection from harm appears through timing or circumstance. Doors that seem open suddenly close, and situations shift unexpectedly. God prevents what could be damaging without overt intervention. Initially, these changes may feel disappointing or confusing. Yet reflection reveals hidden wisdom. God's protective hand is often quiet, working behind the scenes. These moments teach patience and discernment. You recognize that apparent setbacks may be blessings in disguise, shaping character and life direction. Eventually, safety and peace emerge. You see that what seemed like a loss or limitation was actually divine protection. God's work becomes unmistakable in hindsight. Spiritual intuition strengthens, guiding decisions without external validation. You sense right choices and paths with increasing clarity. God uses this awareness to direct your life. This intuitive sense often acts subtly, like a quiet nudge or instinctive understanding. Following these cues builds confidence and trust in divine guidance. Intuition grows through reflection, prayer, and observing patterns. You begin to recognize God's voice amid everyday life. Eventually, intuitive decisions align with outcomes, confirming God's active presence. Faith deepens as reliance on internal discernment becomes natural. A desire for meaningful connections increases. Shallow interactions lose appeal, and relationships with shared values and growth potential become more important. God reshapes social influence. Prioritizing quality relationships enhances spiritual and personal development. You invest energy wisely, aligning with people who support purpose and faith. This shift encourages discernment and emotional stability. Negative influences fade naturally, while supportive connections grow stronger. Eventually, meaningful relationships provide guidance, encouragement, and alignment with God's plan. Divine influence is evident in the people who enter and stay in your life. Patience becomes more natural. Waiting no longer feels frustrating, but is an opportunity for growth and preparation. God cultivates endurance, teaching trust in divine timing. Patience develops faith. You learn to rely on God rather than forcing outcomes. And delays become opportunities for insight, reflection, and skill development. Through this process, clarity and preparedness increase. Decisions are more deliberate, aligned with values, and rooted in trust rather than impatience. Eventually, patience yields results that exceed expectations. God's work manifests in the outcomes of careful timing and readiness. Feeling guided by unseen forces is noticeable. Subtle coincidences, inner nudges, and patterns of alignment point toward divine orchestration. God's presence is evident in these unseen interventions. These signs may appear small but accumulate over time. Trusting them strengthens faith and reinforces reliance on God's wisdom. Guidance often leads to safety, opportunity, and growth. Following these cues builds discernment and spiritual awareness, proving that God is actively involved. Eventually, these subtle signs align with visible results. God's influence becomes clear as direction, opportunity, and protection intersect perfectly. A natural inclination to forgive develops. Letting go of grudges and resentment becomes easier. God uses forgiveness to cultivate peace, freedom, and spiritual maturity. Forgiveness transforms relationships and personal well-being. You release negative energy and create space for growth, clarity, and divine alignment. This process strengthens emotional resilience and faith. You recognize that holding on to anger or resentment blocks progress and obscures God's guidance. Eventually, peace replaces conflict, and relationships improve. God's work is visible in the harmony and emotional balance that forgiveness produces. Subtle shifts in priorities occur without conscious effort. You naturally focus on long-term goals, spiritual alignment, and meaningful action. God reorders attention and energy. These shifts reduce distractions and highlight what truly matters. Energy is spent wisely, reflecting values, purpose, and divine direction. Over time, intentional choices replace impulsive actions. Focus strengthens, patience increases, and spiritual awareness deepens. Eventually, these realignments produce results that reflect preparation, intentionality, and God's guidance. Life feels aligned, purposeful, and enriched. Unexpected encouragement appears during challenges. Supportive words, signs, or events arrive just when needed. God orchestrates timing to uplift, guide, and strengthen faith. Encouragement strengthens perseverance. You gain confidence and clarity during difficult moments, recognizing that divine guidance accompanies effort. These moments teach reliance on God and awareness of His hand in circumstances. Encouragement reinforces patience, trust, and spiritual growth. Eventually, repeated encouragement confirms God's presence. Challenges are met with resilience, faith, and guidance that cannot be explained as coincidence. A growing awareness of blessings occurs daily. Even small moments become meaningful, highlighting God's provision, care, and guidance. Gratitude increases naturally. This awareness shifts focus from lack to abundance. Life feels richer, and patience, faith, and hope strengthen as you notice divine favor in everyday experiences. Recognizing blessings cultivates trust. You learn that God works quietly, orchestrating circumstances to provide protection, opportunity, and growth. Eventually, cumulative awareness reveals patterns of divine intervention. Life aligns with purpose, and God's presence becomes undeniable. Internal strength increases when facing adversity. Challenges once overwhelming now feel manageable. God works through difficulties to build resilience, character, and faith. Adversity strengthens problem-solving skills, patience, and endurance. You rely less on external validation and more on spiritual insight. This growth fosters confidence and courage. Difficulties are approached strategically rather than with fear, reflecting God's preparation. Eventually, resilience produces consistent progress. Challenges become opportunities for development, and God's guidance is evident in the strength and character. Life feels more intentional. Actions, decisions, and relationships naturally reflect purpose. God aligns circumstances to reinforce this growing intentionality. Intentional living reduces distractions and enhances clarity. Priorities are reordered. Energy is spent wisely, and spiritual focus deepens. This awareness strengthens discernment and decision-making. Choices are more deliberate, grounded in faith, and aligned with divine guidance. Eventually, intentionality produces visible outcomes. Life flows with purpose, demonstrating God's close involvement and guidance. A subtle confidence in decision-making develops. Choices are made calmly, with trust in God's guidance. Fear of mistakes diminishes as faith strengthens. Confidence grows through repeated reliance on divine wisdom. Decisions align with purpose, reflecting preparation and spiritual insight. This internal assurance reduces stress, hesitation, and doubt. Clarity of mind and purpose strengthens, creating consistency in actions. Eventually, decisions produce favorable results, confirming God's guidance and the reliability of faith-based choices. Feeling aligned internally with external circumstances becomes noticeable. Life events, relationships, and opportunities begin to make sense in a larger context. God orchestrates alignment. This harmony reduces stress and confusion. You experience confidence, clarity, and peace as paths and opportunities reflect internal values and purpose. Alignment strengthens faith and patience. Trust in God grows, and choices reflect intentionality rather than reaction. Eventually, alignment produces success, clarity, and fulfillment. God's active work is evident in how internal readiness matches external opportunity. A growing sense of divine protection emerges. You notice situations that could have caused harm are avoided. God subtly guides circumstances to ensure safety. Protection may appear as timing, closed doors, or redirected paths. These moments teach patience, trust, and reliance on divine guidance. Over time, awareness of protective intervention strengthens faith. You recognize patterns that reveal God's active work in life. Eventually, protection produces peace and confidence. Decisions feel secure, and life moves smoothly, reflecting God's careful guidance. Subtle shifts in spiritual awareness become obvious. You notice signs, coincidences, or patterns that point toward God's involvement. Awareness deepens naturally. Spiritual awareness strengthens intuition, discernment, and confidence. You begin to notice guidance in unexpected ways. This growth fosters patience and attentiveness. Recognizing subtle signs reinforces trust in God's plan. Eventually, spiritual awareness becomes second nature. Life aligns with purpose, and God's influence is unmistakable. A natural inclination toward gratitude appears in daily life. Small blessings, protection, and guidance are recognized consistently. God nurtures a heart attuned to His work. Gratitude shifts focus from fear or scarcity to abundance and trust. Appreciation reinforces faith and awareness of divine provision. This practice strengthens patience and spiritual maturity. Life feels richer, and decisions are made with clarity and intentionality. Eventually, gratitude reveals patterns of divine involvement. God's guidance becomes evident through consistent provision and care. Subtle alignment of opportunities appears. Career, relationships, or personal growth paths seem coordinated. God orchestrates conditions to ensure preparation meets opportunity. This alignment fosters confidence and focus. Choices reflect purpose, timing feels right, and growth becomes more intentional. Trust develops in divine timing and guidance. You recognize God's hand in synchronizing preparation with opportunity. Eventually, opportunities manifest seamlessly. Alignment produces success, clarity, and peace, confirming God's work in your life. A strengthened inner voice guides decisions clearly. You begin to recognize God's subtle communication through intuition, reflection, and peace. Internal guidance becomes reliable. The inner voice prevents mistakes and directs toward meaningful action. Trust grows as experience confirms the accuracy of this guidance. This process teaches reliance on spiritual insight rather than external validation or impulse. Decisions align with purpose, faith, and readiness. Eventually, life demonstrates harmony between intuition and outcome. God's work is evident in the clarity, direction, and protection provided through internal guidance. A stronger sense of spiritual purpose emerges. Daily actions and choices feel meaningful, and life begins to flow with intention. God uses reflection and guidance to clarify this sense of purpose. This growing awareness influences decisions. You naturally focus on opportunities that align with long-term goals and spiritual growth. Distractions fade and priorities sharpen. Faith strengthens as purpose aligns with action. You recognize that life is not random. Patterns and coincidences point toward divine orchestration. Trust deepens with every step. Eventually, the clarity of purpose produces visible results. Relationships, career, and personal development reflect alignment, showing God's careful work in orchestrating your path. A desire to seek wisdom intensifies. You actively reflect, read, and listen for insight. God fosters curiosity and discernment to guide spiritual and personal growth. Seeking wisdom changes perspective. Challenges are viewed as lessons rather than setbacks. You begin to recognize opportunities in situations that were once frustrating or unclear. This process strengthens decision-making. With each lesson, confidence grows, and reliance on God's guidance deepens. Spiritual maturity develops naturally. Eventually, wisdom becomes evident in outcomes. Choices reflect foresight, discernment, and divine alignment, proving that God is working behind the scenes. Peace amid uncertainty becomes increasingly noticeable. Life may feel chaotic externally, yet internally calm persists. God cultivates stability to guide faith and discernment. Peace teaches reliance on God rather than circumstance. Challenges are approached with confidence, patience, and measured responses rather than impulsive reactions. Over time, calmness reinforces clarity. Decisions become deliberate. Priorities are clear, and subtle guidance is more easily recognized. Eventually, the presence of God is undeniable. Internal peace strengthens faith and illuminates the divine work operating within your life circumstances. A growing sense of patience accompanies waiting periods. Delays no longer frustrate, but are understood as preparation for something greater. God uses time to refine character and strengthen resolve. Patience encourages observation and discernment. You notice subtle signs, learn lessons, and prepare for future opportunities while trusting divine timing. This process strengthens faith. You realize that rushing leads to mistakes, whereas patience ensures readiness for success and alignment with purpose. Eventually, patience produces outcomes that exceed expectations. Life unfolds with precision, reflecting God's wisdom and active guidance. Opportunities appear in unexpected ways. Doors open when least expected, signaling divine orchestration. God demonstrates presence and provision through timing and alignment. Initially, these moments may seem coincidental. With reflection, you recognize guidance and protection, shaping circumstances toward growth and purpose. This awareness reinforces trust in God's timing. Confidence in decision-making grows, and reliance on spiritual insight becomes natural. Eventually, opportunities align seamlessly with preparation. God's work is evident in the orchestration of timing, readiness, and success. A natural inclination to encourage others emerges, You find joy in uplifting people without expectation of reward. God nurtures empathy and compassion as part of spiritual growth. Encouragement strengthens relationships and personal faith. You notice how acts of kindness create impact, foster connection, and reveal God's subtle guidance. Over time, consistent encouragement reinforces trust in God's work. You recognize that generosity aligns with divine purpose and shapes character. Eventually, the influence of your actions reflects God's work. Relationships grow stronger, and opportunities for meaningful impact arise naturally. Growth through adversity becomes more evident. Challenges test patience, resilience, and faith. God uses trials to strengthen character and prepare for future responsibilities. Adversity teaches problem-solving, discernment, and self-reliance. You learn to navigate difficulties with trust rather than fear. These experiences cultivate spiritual maturity. You recognize that each obstacle contributes to long-term alignment with purpose. Eventually, overcoming adversity highlights growth. Results reflect resilience, faith, and divine intervention shaping outcomes. Subtle signs of divine protection emerge. Dangerous or harmful situations are avoided through timing, redirection, or circumstance. God orchestrates life to ensure safety and guidance. Protection may appear unnoticed at first. Reflection reveals wisdom in events that initially seemed inconvenient or frustrating. This process teaches patience and awareness. You begin to trust the unseen hand of God, guiding choices and paths. Eventually, protective interventions create peace and confidence. Life moves with stability, confirming God's active work. Emotional resilience strengthens during trials. Challenges that once caused overwhelm now feel manageable. God cultivates inner strength and stability. Resilience fosters confidence and reflection. Difficult situations are approached with patience, faith, and wisdom rather than fear or impulsivity. Over time, emotional stability supports growth in decision-making, relationships, and spiritual awareness. Internal balance becomes second nature. Eventually, resilience translates into consistent success and clarity. God's work is evident in the capacity to handle challenges gracefully. Clarity in spiritual guidance increases. Subtle nudges, coincidences, and intuition align more consistently, revealing God's close involvement in life. Following these signs strengthens trust and discernment. You begin to recognize guidance even when it is subtle or unconventional. This clarity encourages confidence in choices. Faith deepens as decisions align with purpose and divine instruction. Eventually, alignment between guidance and outcomes confirms God's presence. Subtle cues become undeniable markers of divine involvement. Internal alignment with values and priorities becomes evident. Life feels cohesive, with decisions, actions, and relationships reflecting purpose. God orchestrates this harmony gradually. Alignment strengthens intentionality and focus. Distractions fade, and energy is devoted to what matters most spiritually and personally. Faith and discernment grow naturally. You recognize patterns that reinforce the understanding of divine orchestration. Eventually, harmony produces tangible results. Life flows smoothly, and God's hand is visible in every decision, opportunity, and relationship. Growth through reflection becomes apparent. Daily meditation, prayer, and introspection lead to insight, clarity, and spiritual maturity. God cultivates understanding through self-awareness. Reflection fosters patience, emotional intelligence, and discernment. Challenges are better understood, and decisions become intentional. This process strengthens faith. Spiritual insights provide guidance and reinforce trust in God's plan for life. Eventually, reflection produces alignment and clarity. Choices reflect purpose, demonstrating God's active work in shaping understanding and growth. An increasing ability to discern truth emerges. You recognize lies, deception, and misdirection more clearly. God sharpens insight to guide wise decisions. Discernment grows through reflection, observation, and experience. Decisions are informed by intuition and alignment with values. This heightened awareness prevents mistakes and fosters confidence. You trust guidance over external influence or peer pressure. Eventually, discernment produces consistent results. God's work is evident in clarity, alignment, and the avoidance of pitfalls. A sense of spiritual momentum develops. Progress feels cumulative, with small victories leading naturally to larger successes. God builds forward movement through consistent preparation. Momentum strengthens motivation, focus, and confidence. Efforts compound over time, reinforcing faith and trust in divine timing. This cumulative progress teaches patience. You understand that consistent alignment produces exponential growth and opportunity. Eventually, momentum produces visible achievements and fulfillment. God's guidance is clear in the seamless unfolding of life's opportunities. Inner peace deepens despite external challenges. Calm becomes instinctive, even in uncertainty. God nurtures a tranquil heart to guide decisions and build trust. Peace fosters clarity and patience. Actions are deliberate rather than impulsive, and spiritual awareness strengthens as a result. This stability supports growth. Confidence increases, relationships improve, and challenges are navigated with wisdom and faith. Eventually, enduring peace confirms God's active work. Life unfolds with clarity, alignment, and confidence. Opportunities for learning and growth appear naturally. Challenges, mentorship, and reflection provide insight and experience. God uses these avenues to develop skill, patience, and discernment. Learning fosters resilience and confidence. You adapt, understand, and grow through consistent exposure to situations designed for development. This process strengthens faith. You recognize God's guidance in timing, opportunity, and outcomes, trusting that each lesson contributes to purpose. Eventually, accumulated learning produces visible results. Success, clarity, and wisdom reflect divine preparation and guidance. Spiritual awareness deepens through everyday experiences. Events, interactions, and insights carry meaning beyond the surface. God works subtly to illuminate purpose and direction. Awareness fosters trust and confidence. You notice patterns, guidance, and provision that reinforce faith and decision-making. This growth strengthens patience and discernment. Recognizing divine influence becomes second nature, and reliance on God increases. Eventually, life aligns with understanding. Spiritual awareness guides action, producing harmony, clarity, and fulfillment that confirms God's work. Encounters with supportive people occur at critical moments. Mentors, friends, or strangers provide guidance, insight, or encouragement when needed. God positions people strategically. These encounters teach lessons, reinforce faith, and provide perspective. Support often arrives subtly, but has lasting impact. Trusting guidance from these individuals strengthens judgment. God uses these relationships to refine choices and confirm direction. Eventually, influence and timing of connections become clear. Life reflects alignment, and divine orchestration is unmistakable in these critical interactions. Subtle guidance through dreams, thoughts, or feelings becomes noticeable. God communicates through inner prompting to guide decisions, reveal purpose, and provide clarity. These moments teach attentiveness, discernment, and trust. Following inner guidance develops confidence and strengthens faith. Guidance fosters preparation. You notice alignment between internal cues and external outcomes, reinforcing reliance on divine wisdom. Eventually, the accuracy and impact of subtle guidance demonstrate God's work. Life aligns with intention, clarity, and purpose. Unexpected breakthroughs appear after persistent effort. Success, clarity, or resolution comes suddenly, reflecting preparation and timing. God orchestrates moments for maximum impact. Breakthroughs validate patience, faith, and diligence, Challenges overcome, lessons learned, and consistent effort produce tangible results. This process strengthens trust in divine orchestration. You recognize that breakthroughs are neither random nor coincidental, but carefully guided. Eventually, life moves forward with momentum and alignment. God's work is evident in opportunities, solutions, and success that occur precisely when needed. A deep sense of alignment with God's plan becomes unmistakable. You notice that actions, relationships, and decisions converge naturally toward purpose. Life feels synchronized and intentional. This alignment creates clarity in decision-making. Confusion diminishes, priorities sharpen, and faith strengthens as you recognize patterns of guidance and provision. Over time, this awareness cultivates peace, confidence, and perseverance. You trust that even unseen events are part of a larger divine design working for your good. Eventually, life reflects harmony between intention, effort, and outcome. Opportunities, growth, and fulfillment appear naturally, revealing that God is actively shaping every step of your journey. As we reflect on these 8 signs, one truth becomes clear. God is working in ways we often cannot see, yet His presence is undeniable. From subtle guidance to major breakthroughs, every moment of patience, every small victory, and every lesson learned is part of His divine orchestration. Life begins to feel intentional, aligned, and purposeful. Challenges become opportunities, delays become preparation, and moments of doubt transform into strength and faith. Every action, decision, and encounter fits into a larger tapestry of divine timing and guidance. The evidence is everywhere. Through growing intuition, strengthened resilience, unexpected blessings, meaningful relationships, and inner peace, God's hand is actively shaping your character, choices, and life path. The signs are abundant if we pay attention with faith, awareness, and gratitude. So look closely at your life today. Notice the subtle patterns, the coincidences, and the moments of clarity. Every sign points to one truth. God is working closely in your life right now, preparing you for a future filled with purpose, blessing, and divine alignment. Trust Him, follow His guidance, and watch how your life transforms in ways beyond imagination.